Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast that promises to troll you less than the U.S. Open Twitter account. This is the Sports Clichés podcast. I'm Craig. That's Jay. Jay, have you seen the U.S. Open Twitter account recently?
A little bit, yeah. I saw they were clowning Drew Lock a little bit,
Oh my
so
god, they killed the man.
kind of like yeah. He was. It was a shot taken at a like random Twitter user, but one that was like, yeah. And so like Drew Lock, it wasn't even a direct attack on Drew Lock. He absolutely just catches a stray off this one
Oh, yeah.
for no good reason. Drew Lock does not deserve this. He's trying out there, right? That was mean.
Oh
But
my
like
god.
it's I think the funny thing with like some of these social media accounts, like it's all these. It's just funny when a absolutely like Radio Shack. That's another one that's come about recently,
Yeah.
right? Radio Shack's on a
Yeah,
while
Radio
now.
Shack.
It's like these big like corporate entities, and then they hire on some motherfucker, and they just start making wacky posts. And I understand, like, and it definitely drives views. Me and you pay attention to it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's just like such a, I don't know. It's just like a hello fellow kids sort of like moment that you just get in like the big corporate world when you get multi-million dollar like companies and entities and something like the U.S. Open, just like trolling like Joe 84 or something like that.
Yeah,
I
it
don't know,
was.
but it's pretty funny.
His
Pretty
display
funny.
name was like #1 Seahawks fan or something
Yeah.
like that. And he was like, "Oh, I'm about to end this man's life." It was it
It's
was very unnecessary.
it's
I
already
remember.
rough for them out there. Why you gotta pile it on U.S. Open?
Listen,
It's pretty
they
rough.
know they have to watch 17 games of Drew Lock this year. By the way, the guy's response, I don't know if you saw it or not. He's like, "Ugh, our starter's gonna be Geno Smith anyways."
Well,
Like
I
that
mean,
made it better.
that would be my argument almost. I'm like, you might not be watching Drew for all 17 of those damn games, man. Think about it.
Like Geno Smith made it better though.
I don't know. I don't know. Flashes. Geno Smith shows those flashes. I think a little bit more maybe than Drew has, but yeah, that's gonna be at the. And we'll maybe we'll touch upon some NFL stuff, but why not? That's gonna just that's so tough for Seattle, and I'm a guy who loves to see now that the Seahawks are gonna be kind of in dismay, but incredibly tough division, and it's just like you just lost Russell, and it's just like everything about your, the Legion of Boom and all that shit's gone. It's like it just doesn't seem that long ago, but yep, now they're, that's gonna be a tough season for them. Well, we'll see
They're gonna
though.
be a bad team this year, if I had to guess.
We'll see down the line. But let's get into some more recent stuff. I suppose we've been on a little bit of a break since our last podcast, but I know when it was when we last did a pod, we were kind of right in the middle and like actually a little bit toward the beginning of a couple playoff runs, very interesting ones. Obviously, gotta say, pretty happy with how the NBA playoffs went and the finals. Dubs coming away with it was a very back and forth series. Obviously, at one point they were down. You're talking about down 2-1 in that series, and going into an away game right there. I mean, that could have been a 3-1 series, and you're talking about, even though you got two games at home, that's a come back from 3-1 the other side, that sort of thing. It would be that would have been some interesting history if Warriors were able to come back from a 3-1 on the other side of it, so many years later. But yeah, Warriors, end up taking it to the Celtics. We could go into certain games, I suppose. Obviously, Steph's performance, finally taking home the MVP himself, having that incredible Game 4 after what was a pretty garbage Game 3 from what I remember. Actually, not hitting a three for the first time in so many games, regular season or postseason. Actually going over in that stat in one of those games in that series as well. And I don't even think that was the bad game in that series for him. Very interesting. It was kind of a tale of two series. The one thing that was very telling to me as a Warriors fan and watching them, it's obvious, I think some of the talk, and obviously at the beginning of the entire playoffs, you're talking about Jordan Poole actually being your starting point guard for the team. Steph actually coming off the bench at the beginning of the playoffs, kind of people may have forgotten there, and still holding his own at points throughout the series. Some bad shots, some bad decisions, and in general, like the way that the offense looked when it was perhaps just Poole out there, I think it still needs to catch up a little bit. But the bright spots there. You got something to the future. You got guys like Gary Payton Jr., who are looking like they're really coming to their own. The lack of a big man like James Wiseman, I thought that was really going to hurt this team, and it did in spots. They got out-rebounded early in this series against the Celtics, and it was looking like that was going to be their undoing. I think I want to say one of the odd-number games, either Game 1 or Game 3, I can't quite remember, but we're not even halfway through the third quarter, and I think the Celtics already had like 13 offensive rebounds. And it was just like, you cannot be giving up the extra shots. You're letting guys like Al Horford all of a sudden get hot. It was amazing to actually see that dude be able to, like, he was hitting corner threes. He was actually a real spark plug for their offense. So that stuff was awesome, kind of interesting to see. But in the end, I think the key thing to remember about any of these great Warriors teams, as you've been kind of looking through the years, the championships. And obviously, people are going to look toward guys like Steph, guys like KD, even an Iguodala or something like that, and or Clay, and points manufacturing. But I think in that last game, the stat line that Draymond put up there, and he almost did. He almost actually puts up a triple-double in that game. He gets pretty close. Of course, doesn't quite come out that way. I think it's still a triple-single. But, like, how much he got involved in that game, and overall, just the team defense that the Warriors showed, that's what won him the championship there. And the Celtics were actually probably the better on paper defensive team coming into that series. But I think that's the legacy that the Warriors have had. As great as, their shot-making ability and offensive weapons like a Clay and a Steph are, it was really their defense that I think brought home that championship. And, yeah, multiple games in that final game. Boston's able to put up 90, but it's like you're expected in this league to be able to put up triple digits in a game, and they were denied, I think, 3 games in a row there. Yeah. To get triple digits. So it's just very impressive on that end by the Warriors, and I think that's what got it for them.
Yeah, you can't win in modern-day NBA putting up 90, 95 points. You can't be relying on teams putting up less than 90, and it felt like that's what the Celtics needed in the series. They had a shockingly small amount of offense. Yeah. Tatum, I thought, had a decent series, but never really took over the way Curry did. You look beyond that, Marcus Smart was in and out of games for the most part, right? And beyond that, they had nothing. They could not find consistent offense in that series. And you're right, a lot of that does go to the Warriors' defense, who really did a great job of just shutting down Tatum's supporting cast. Right, they knew Tatum's going to get his, and he did for the most part. Again, he never took over, but he certainly was decent. I think he averaged something like 23, 24 points a game, right? So he was decent. Yeah. But they never let him take over, and they essentially shut out the supporting cast. And if you can do that to a team, you're going to beat them more often than not, especially when, as good as Steph was in that series, his supporting cast showed up. You mentioned in Game 6 the double-double from Draymond that was nearly a triple-double. He was a couple assists away from the triple-double. I think he ended up with 12, 12, and 8. Andrew Wiggins was very, very much a difference maker in those last few games.
Yeah. Yeah.
Clay was never his old self, but you knew you could rely on him for the occasional points when you needed them. There were pieces there. Kayvon Looney, I thought, had a very good series in those last few games, being able to help really settle down that rebounding difference that they struggled with early in that series. The Golden State Warriors supporting cast came out to play, and when that supporting cast is going like that, it opens up Steph Curry to do what Steph Curry does best and just shoot the damn lights out. At that point, that series felt over. I remember watching Game 4 when the Warriors won that to tie that series up at 2 and feeling like, nah, this series is different now. Because you saw it. Tatum wasn't going to be able to carry the team on his own. And that's not a knock on Jason Tatum. But it's just one of those things where the supporting cast wasn't showing up for him in the same way that they did for the Warriors. And absolutely deserved MVP for Steph Curry, and he deserves a lot of the talking points he's getting. But I think, Wiggins, Looney, Green, all these guys need a big shout out for really being a great supporting cast for him down the stretch.
Yeah, I think the thing with Tatum, especially in that last game, and actually specifically in that last game, what they did the best to him, he was definitely he was on and off as far as the offensive game was concerned. Shot 33% for the field. That's not going to do you too much help. But what they did do, it seemed like, is especially early on, because I remember he racked up 3 fouls real quick in this game. So he got in foul trouble early, and so that throws the rhythm off. He's sitting, I think, pretty early into the second quarter there. And the Celtics bench just let them down as far as being able to play against who the Warriors were putting out then. Once you took like a Tatum off the floor right there, you took a Marcus Smart off the floor there, all of a sudden, for whoever they had in those backup roles, they were getting lit up in those moments. You brought up Looney, and that was kind of a point I was circling to, didn't quite get to it. But yeah, with Wiseman down, you had a guy like Looney be able to step in and be a big presence that needed to be there, along with the Draymond. And then obviously in that last game, Wiggins, you brought him up. I mean, no bigger. I think he was an incredible defensive presence. He was getting Tatum a decent amount of the time as far as the matchup was concerned on the defensive end of it. And multiple blocks, 3 blocks in that game, I believe, for Wiggins, as well as some just nice explosive offense that they needed at points. Obviously, I think everybody this playoffs, I think that Luka dunk is going to be remembered for a bit. That is going to be on highlight reels for a while. Not and the way Luka took it, like such.
Yeah.
He tried to sell that so bad that no, he just got absolutely just over. So yeah, and that's obviously a lot of points got brought up about people knocked Wiggins, they knocked the Warriors for that trade. I've been high on Wiggins. We've been loving the Canadian sensation for a while, so it's great to see that work out for him. And absolutely, you need those kind of guys to come in. Because there's going to be the times where you're never really depending on Draymond, obviously, to put up points. Although when he did put up a couple threes in that last game there, it was pretty, like, you kind of felt it. When he got that nice quarter 3, I think it was in the first, and it was just like, it was, all right, yeah, Draymond's draining shots. We're feeling good about it. Like, all right. But Clay was ice cold. I felt like he had wide open looks that he was clanking. Steph, obviously, he had a down game or two in that series, but overall, it can't be denied how much of a spark plug he is. And always will be pretty underrated on the defensive side of things. He works his ass off on the defensive side. And then, getting those rebounds too. You don't find too many guys with, his kind of build, his kind of stature on the court, and are typically going to be playing the perimeter on the defensive side, but be able to be such a factor on the rebounding side of things. And you need that as the Warriors, as you're not stacked with big guys in there. You need to be able to have your athleticism. You need to be able to have guards be able to get out there and get your rebounds when it comes to it. So yeah, great to see that. And overall, this one was, no doubt it was worrying after those 3 games, because it didn't seem like that rebound game was going to go the Warriors' way. And it seemed like they were just going to give up so many more extra possessions. And you can't let the Celtics do that, because they were eating them alive. They would get that extra possession, and that would turn to a 3 on the other side, because someone would be left, it's a scramble at that point. They're hitting it to the corner. They're hitting it to the, to the wing. And they're draining those shots, and it was just absolute backbreakers for the Warriors in the beginning of the series. So, need to overcome that. I think that in the defensive end, keys to victory right there.
Yeah, you mentioned Game 3, obviously, the 15 offensive rebounds they gave up. And
there we go.
The interesting thing about that game that I remember is nobody had a particularly... It's not like Robert Williams had 20 rebounds and 10... It was kind of everybody was getting in on it. I think they had 15 offensive rebounds as a team. The most any one player had, I believe, was 3. So everybody was just kind of getting in on those boards and crashing them. But I think 2 things happened. A, Golden State adapted to that style a little bit better. I think I think after Game 3, it was a bit of a wake-up call of listen, we gotta be hustling on these boards. Every position, every player. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're Steph Curry, Andrew Wiggins, Kayvon Looney, Draymond Green. You
got to about face, and you got to be looking for that ball, because
it's
giving them weird trajectories. It would just go all the way back to the perimeter, and they'd be getting a board. It's easy stuff. You can't be
exactly. And then I also wonder if Boston maybe ran out of steam a little bit, coming off of back-to-back 7-game really tough series. Right, they had the Bucks and the Heat. Back-to-back really tough 7-game series, whereas Golden State's road, I wouldn't say it's easier per se, because you never have an easy road, but they never went 7, right? They went 5 in their first series, 6 in the second, 5 in the Western Conference Finals, and had a little bit of rest in between every series, had a time to regain their legs, regroup. I wonder if Boston maybe just ran out of steam there towards the end, having played 2 really tough series, having to get to the finals.
And as a Warriors fan, I hate to admit it, but if injuries don't break so hard for that Memphis team, I wonder if that series goes the way it did. Obviously, Morant took a spill pretty early in that series, and that kind of spelled the doom for Memphis at that point. You get a healthy John Morant out there, I think that's a whole different series. But yeah, I was very surprised after what looked like could be a potentially competitive series with the Mavs. Folded, just absolutely folded. And then, but yeah, I think that's the one, because I think that's potentially a series that even if the Warriors win that might be a really scrappy 7-gamer. Who knows what you get going into Dallas then after that point. They're just coming off a 7 as well. Maybe that comes out to a little bit more even. Maybe that's a series that goes 6 or 7 itself. Who knows? A lot of what ifs, but absolutely I would agree with you. The road, I think once John Morant went down, the road kind of made itself a lot easier for the Warriors.
It did. It broke well for the Warriors. And again, that's not me knocking the Warriors in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. Listen, you can only play what's in front of you, right? It's not the Warriors' fault that the Celtics had to go through 7 games of hell with the Bucks and then 7 games of hell with the Heat. The Warriors got what they were given. The Suns got eliminated early. I think that series would have been a much tougher series for them than the Mavericks, just the way the two teams line up, right? Instead, the Mavericks knock off the Suns, and you get the Mavericks, and they came into that series looking a little bit fatigued themselves, having never been that far with that core before. And, the Warriors, veterans of the game, right? Been there, done that. That they took care of business, and they got to the final healthy, rested, unscathed. Boston came out strong early, but I wonder if that in itself maybe took the legs out from under them. In those last 3 games, they just never looked terribly competitive with the Warriors.
Well,
it's hard to say.
It was a strange one too, because I didn't like the flow of the series at all. Basically, if you remember, okay, it breaks. Does Boston take game 1 of that series? I'm trying to think.
Takes game 1.
Takes game 1. So we get the split. Game 3, Boston takes it in what was I believe Warriors were up late in that one. They had the chance to get that win. They don't. The talk after it was, I think it was Clay, it was Draymond talking about how the Boston crowd and that sort of thing. And it's just like, you're about to play another game against them in 2 days. Do you really, really, really want to put any sound bite out there? And it's just like, you're just asking for it. But if you're able to come out there and then shut them down in game 4 like they did, you come back for that game 6, you play as well as they did, and you shut them down again, that crowd's heart is out of it basically after that third quarter, because I think they put up like a 17-point third quarter. It was looking pretty long and gone at that point. So I think that was interesting. I think that could have really worked against them. You could have had just a super fired up, and if they took 2 games at home right there, you're down 3-1. It's really not looking good if you're the Warriors. But taking that game 4 after kind of those sound bites and stuff came out, that was pretty pivotal, I think, too, because that doesn't go down well. It's not a good look if you can't take a little crowd noise. That's basically what most people are going to think. Now, things that are being said might be a little bit more fucked up than just a little crowd noise, but that's drunk assholes at a sports game, baby. That's
welcome to Boston.
That's par for the course, man. Yeah.
Guess what? You look at some of those Eastern Conference teams, that Philly crowd would have been way worse. Tell you that right now.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I wonder if those sound bites, the context they were taken in is, this crowd is getting to Draymond and it's getting to Golden State a little bit.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was just Golden State really riling themselves up. Right? This is the kind of shit you want to talk? Okay. Right? And, I wonder if maybe that's a little bit of what it was. But I find it interesting that you bring up the third quarter of Game 6, because I also think that's the back-breaking point of this series. But if you remember correctly, there was a point early in that third quarter where the Warriors were up about 15 or so.
Yeah.
Then Boston goes on a 10-0 run.
Yeah.
And it looks like this game has shifted completely. And there's a play that I remember clear as day in this series that I think ends this series completely, and it's Marcus Smart goes to make a drive on Steph, who pickpockets him, saves the ball. They go down the other way, and Steph hits about a 40-foot three. Death nail in that series. Right? And I agree with you. I'm glad you brought up the third quarter of that series, because I do think that is the death of that series. Boston had one last push at that series at that moment, and that steal by Steph, the long 3 after, I think that ices that series completely. I think that's the death nail in the heart. The Boston crowd seemed to go silent after it. It felt like the fans knew. It felt like the players just lost the energy at that point. But it's just one of those things, right, where it just felt like Golden State had a little bit more in the legs. Felt like and let's be honest, it kind of felt like Steph had a little something to play for. It kind of felt like Steph Curry wanted to shut up some haters who, could they have won without KD? could Steph win it without Clay being his sidekick? Right, did
I
all that this year.
I mean, I haven't heard too much of that Clay one, just because I mean, every
That's
Batman needs their Robin, right? Or
Yeah, that was the thing that people were throwing out in the
that's
first
so be it.
title. It's bizarre. Like
Yeah.
nobody knocks Jordan for having Pippen,
Yeah.
right? Like
And the KD thing, it's like, well, they did win before KD.
yeah, well,
they did pick
I
up
think
a
that's why
championship.
they brought up the Clay
Yeah.
argument is to right because there's certain sports broadcasters who shall not be named here who like to just start shit for the sake of
Oh
starting
yeah,
shit.
no, of course.
And you see a generational talent, and that's what Steph is. That argument's done.
Yeah.
By the way, anybody who wants to say not top 10 or anything like that, you don't have an argument anymore. It's over.
And I think a lot of that stuff it does point to the gas tank running a bit low for Boston. The way that you have to play the Warriors team, and it especially became evident, I think, in that game right there. In I want to say that game 4, you start to realize that we gotta keep on Steph, and that's nothing new. Doubling up, keeping on Steph, being able to deal with the screens and the off the ball movement and that sort of thing. That is, you're gonna have to deal with that with the Warriors, but you gotta deal with it for 4 quarters with the Warriors. You gotta keep up with Steph Curry running around, finding gaps, finding space. Deal with me having to extend this conversation until Craig gets back. You had to deal with a lot of things. But overall, yeah, great win by the Warriors there. I think the exhaustion definitely hit Boston there. It was a very long series outside of the Nets. they dog walked the Nets pretty well. And now all of a sudden you have a Nets team that's been blown up, and got a couple items that
Sorry about that.
already happened. Yeah, no problem. Just to finish up my point, yeah, basically the whole idea that all those things are known about what you have to do against the Warriors and their ball movement. It's funny how there's so many points in watching the Warriors play that, oh man, the way they do cuts, the way they work off screens, off the ball movement, the passing and that sort of thing, how it goes around, they find the good cuts. It looks fantastic when it's working. When it doesn't, it looks so goddamn ugly because it ends up being the ball just goes around. They don't really have a good look. You're down to 3, 2, 1 on the shot, and you're just having to jack something up basically. So it looks bad when it doesn't work out that way. But when you're not playing that ISO ball, you have to keep up with a guy like Steph Curry. And you have to keep up with this guy like Steph Curry for game 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then like you start to see it in game 4, obviously, as far as the point performance. And in that game 6, that's it right there. I think it's just like their gas tank ran so low at that point, and we gotta still keep up with this son of a bitch running off of screens. They would target Tatum with the screens. They would target your Marcus Smarts with those screens because keep those legs going. The more active and the more they had to try to keep up with a guy like Steph on the defensive side, the less effective they definitely were on the offensive side. And their legs started to not be with them. They were having to take contested threes all of a sudden instead of wide open threes. And yeah, it just unraveled and they couldn't put it together. But yeah, ultimately, I think a very interesting look at, you still got this core. It's still going to be around for a bit here. with the Warriors. A little bit older now, but their style, the way they play, I don't see Steph's legs really being lost from under him. You just wonder if they could kind of keep that going, and if you're able to add guys like a Wiggins, and you got that young depth in Poole, in Gary Payton.
Well,
guys
they
like
don't
that.
have Gary Payton anymore.
They don't. That's right. Gary's off. But who'd they pick up? They picked up that dude from Sacramento. That's supposed to be kind of a decent fill-in piece there. But other pieces, you get a guy like James Wiseman back all of a sudden, who hopefully will have some fresher legs after as long as he's been out. We'll see.
Yeah. Obviously this offseason hasn't started so great for them, losing Gary Payton, losing Otto Porter, but
That's right, Otto. Yeah.
That was bound to happen. I think when you have a run like that and those role players fill in as well as they did, they're going to get broken off. I think it was probably smart of Golden State to let them get paid elsewhere.
Yeah. Damian Lee also to the Suns. So Damian Lee, like, really back-end bench player for the Warriors.
Yeah.
But Dante DiVincenzo.
I like DiVincenzo.
And so, yeah, they brought him in for a little less than 10. 2 year. About 9.3 mil. Okay.
Solid bench shooter. It's, a kind of pseudo Otto Porter replacement without the wingspan.
Yeah.
But yeah, just decent bench shooter. I like DiVincenzo. It'll be interesting to see what they do. Obviously, the big question with the balance of power in the NBA right now is where's KD going to end up? Right. I think at the moment the Suns are pretty heavy favorites. The Raptors close behind them on the Vegas odds, and then I think everybody else is kind of distant from there.
How about Zion sticking with the Pelicans? I thought that was very intriguing. Like, man, that's interesting. I really hope they're able to build something around him, because it'd be a shame if he was just stuck there for another 4 years or whatever he has right now, 5 years.
And to me, the interesting thing is, have you seen enough of Zion to to give him the Supermax contract that he's about to get? I mean, between when he's healthy and in shape, he's unbelievable. We've all seen it.
Yeah.
But those are big ifs, and in particular, I think the in-shape one would worry me more than the health one. Guys get injured. It happens, right? If you see the talent there, I think you're willing to commit to it. The fact that there's been multiple times that he's reported to camp, I believe the one quote last year was wildly out of shape, is a bit concerning to me, right? I don't know. I talent to justify it.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something about it that we've seen it with some athletes. Absolutely, there are guys that they even though it's their livelihood, they never really take care of themselves. You could argue, obviously we have Oakland quarterback. Who the hell am I thinking? Big dude. Would throw off his knees. Thank you, Russell. I knew Russell, and I kept wanting to say Russell Wilson, and I didn't want to say that, obviously, because I knew that was fucking wrong. Jamarcus Russell, you have that end of it. You have guys that, like, still have success with it. Like, Pablo Sandoval always needed to, like, take about 25, 30 off the belly, dude. He never did, and he probably could have had a longer career in the MLB due to that, but he still had a pretty damn successful career for a big dude. So, like, you have that gap of it. Yeah. You have the ones that fuck up, like a Jamarcus, and you hope that Zion's the one that's able, especially in basketball, with how much impact you're putting on your knees. You're already talking about an ankle injury, right? Is what he's coming back off of. Foot, stress fracture. That's what it is. Foot.
Stress fracture.
When you're talking about that stuff, you hope that he's enough of a professional, and obviously he has the money and the ability to have people around him to keep his nutrition in check and that sort of thing, and get him back healthy in that regard. You hope that that would be the case. But yeah, I mean, you just don't know. Where does he land on that scale of, is he just going to be big dude that's always a little out of shape, but he's able to work off that? I mean, Shaq wasn't necessarily fit either, I guess, but I mean, he was also a fucking workhorse like no
Towards
other.
the end of his career, that's true. But I mean,
Yeah,
if you look at Magic
you're not
Shaq,
wrong.
that dude
You're
was cut.
not wrong, but like my thinking being like he was like that absolutely didn't hinder his
Yeah.
ability later in his career.
No, he was
It
still
more than
unbelievable.
helped his ability basically
Yeah.
in his career. His shit, he needed to just work on fucking free throws. That's
He
it.
should
I don't know how
learn to
you
shoot free
don't.
throws.
I don't know how you don't do that. That's almost a little bit more egregious to me in some
I
respects
agreed.
than losing 20 pounds.
Because it's
Almost.
not the hardest thing in the world to fix. You
Just
sit your ass at the free throw
get in the
line and you
fucking
shoot
pocket.
them until you get comfortable with it. Like,
Yeah.
it's
No.
not one of those things where it's like, oh, it's just one of those things you can't fix, right? Like, if a guy can't shoot the three, like he doesn't have the ability to shoot the three at 22 in the league, he's not gonna learn it, right? It's not like Ben Simmons is ever gonna be a great three-point shooter. But you can easily become a better free throw shooter by just sitting your ass at the line and shooting some free throws.
Like, we need to get like 70% out of you, Shaq. Like, please. No?
Like, that's just
50?
it.
53?
Nobody's looking for him to be a 90% free throw
No,
shooter.
please.
But you're shooting 40s and 50s, bro. Pump that thing up to like a 65, 70, and we're working.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna stop hacking you at
Yeah,
that point.
you can't hack at that point. You're losing too much on possessions, too many fouls.
When you're hovering around 50%, they're gonna hack you all day. Yeah, that I would agree is slightly more egregious. I will say a more recent example of a player who had weight issues. And this is obviously one that's a little bit closer to me because he plays for my team. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think, is a great example of a guy who, when he came up at around 310 pounds. I think he was massive, and it was all gut, right? And he's down to 235, 240 now, and we've seen the results the last couple seasons, right? Like, the dude's absolutely, he's an absolute monster, right? He didn't lose any of the power, he just kind of reallocated the weight. So, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that Zion, figures out nutrition, figures out, the workout habits that keep you in that kind of solid shape, and then becomes an absolute beast again, because when he plays, he's unbelievable. Yeah. So I agree with you. It was a very interesting one on both sides. I'm interested that Zion looked at the Pelicans and where they're at and decided to stay. Yeah. I wonder if he regrets that, kind of like Anthony Davis did in a couple of years' time, but we'll see where that's at. And I'm kind of surprised that the Pelicans saw all the issues they've had with Zion and were willing to sign a 5-year Supermax. Yeah. Like, you're banking a lot of money on a guy fixing issues that he has right now. So we'll see how that one works out for them. Obviously, like I said, Anthony Davis lived to regret the contract he signed in New Orleans. We'll see if the same thing happens to Zion. But yeah, it's been an interesting offseason, right? And then, as I mentioned before, obviously there's the whole KD thing that's the big thing, right? Where's KD going to end up? Is it Phoenix? Could the Raptors potentially hijack this move? Is there a third team that we haven't talked enough about who maybe have a play at this? It's got to be somebody who has significant assets to move, has a team in place that is already kind of ready to win, and is willing to move significant roster pieces to do it. Because I doubt the Nets aren't getting multiple roster pieces, if not multiple starters, out of this trade, right? Which is why I think the Raptors are an interesting piece in this mix, right? Yeah. Because I think the Raptors would be willing to trade OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., right? Guys like that who would be starters for the Nets next year to finish that trade. Now, do I think KD would come up and play for Toronto? That's another story. But I get why the Raptors' name are being brought up in this mix. Ultimately, I think he ends up with Phoenix. Of course, he'll end up with Phoenix, right? That's where he wants to go. The Suns want him. It seems to just make sense. But it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I mean, just crazy what that team was, all of year and a half, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Harden, Kyrie, KD.
Sounds like they're all going to be gone.
It's on paper, it's like, Jesus, that's. I mean, you could have your qualms about how Harden plays defense or whatever about Kyrie and his decision making of whatever, but on paper, that should have been deep playoff runs, championship potential. That nothing even close. They got absolutely dog walked in a 4-gamer against Celtics to start the playoffs, and it was, obviously play-in game. It's just like, oh man, that fell apart real fucking quick. But I think it's I like the spreading back around of talent. There's gonna be some new look teams out there. Oddly enough, I mean, I think a couple of teams that might not have much shift at all are going to be teams like the Warriors, the Celtics,
the Mavericks.
Yeah, so you're going to see some familiar faces in there. I don't think it's going to be quite as crazy as this NFL offseason's been, but as far as some changing faces, different places sort of thing, but we will see, definitely. Yeah. Let's move on. I'm sure you got a few things in mind about how this NHL playoff shook down, and with the Avs taking one, pretty cool. I mean, it definitely took a look on paper. They looked phenomenal, as far as through the regular season. So not a terrible pick coming into it to have taken it all the way. I took a look against Tampa Bay, and I was like, oh, man, is the door just opening up for Tampa to just be able to run the table on this thing again? Didn't end up happening. There were little glimpses, but overall, yeah, Avs. How do you feel about the NHL? How that shook it down?
So, the NHL, I'd say more than any other league, it's very rare that you get the actual two best teams in the league meet each other in the final. Because the NHL playoffs are just a fucking meat grinder, man, and it has no mercy on who the favorites are, who should be there, who shouldn't be there. That's why you so frequently see 7th, 8th seeds make it to the Cup final, right? It's because a lot of the NHL playoffs is surviving the NHL playoffs. So it was very refreshing to see the best team in the West, and in my opinion, the best team in the East, meet each other in the finals. Now, you can make an argument, obviously, Tampa Bay was third in their division, but they're the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions.
Right.
They can coast through a regular season and still be... They know what they got to do, right? You see it a lot with championship teams like that. How many times did the Brady Patriots go 11-5, 10-6,
yeah.
And they're mortal, guys.
Yeah.
Look out, and they weren't.
You guys know that the Titans were the number 1 seed in the AFC last year?
Exactly.
Nobody will remember that shit anymore.
Really, the really playoff-ready good teams know how to do just enough in the regular season to get themselves in a good position to make a run in the playoffs. And that's what Tampa Bay did.
Yeah.
This series was awesome. I know it didn't go 7, but boy, it was about as close of a series as you can have. 4 of the 6 games decided by 1 goal. The 2 other games, each team blew out the other one once. And then everything else there was 2 overtime games, 4 1-goal games, like I said. It was really a series where Colorado won it, but boy, a couple bounces one way or the other, and we could be talking about Tampa Bay as 3-time Stanley Cup champions. It was such a tight series. It was awesome. You mentioned it. Colorado was the favorite pillar to post. First day of the preseason, Colorado was the Vegas favorite to win the Stanley Cup. Was never not the Vegas favorite to win the Stanley Cup, and won the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
That team is scary good. And the thing about them is, it's not like they're going anywhere. This core is locked up for a while. Makar's not going anywhere. Um, McKinnon's not going anywhere. Landeskog's not going anywhere. That team's going to be together for a while. And this is also a team, by the way, who's not perfect. Their goaltending situation is still a real issue that they need to figure out. And man, we were talking about the Lightning being a potential dynasty, but the Avalanche really have that potential if they can just really shore up the small pieces that need to be shored up on that team. Whew. They're good, man, and the Lightning are getting back. This is a franchise that has proven they know exactly how to manage the salary cap better than anybody else in the league. They've already traded Ryan McDonough, right? Ryan McDonough's now off their books. That's a huge contract gone. That though Ryan McDonough's still a good player, he wasn't living up to the money they were paying him anymore. So they moved him, and now they've just opened up $6.5 million in salary. You think Tampa Bay's not going to spend that well?
Yeah.
Like it. That's the thing about this series that I loved is for the first time in a while, it was the two best teams, and they played like the two best teams. It was an awesome series to watch.
Do you not think that that Darcy is gonna just stick a net for them, as far as for the Avs? Because I mean he's been on the up and up. I think obviously in this series, showed some pretty good stuff, and you know, hasn't gotten this kind of work for a few seasons, right? But uh, you know, I thought played a phenomenal series, and you know after a an incredibly early goal given up. Obviously, you tighten it up, and you only give up one in a pretty pivotal game there. I'd be surprised if they didn't just kind of stick with that behind the pipe, between the pipes. But it's always tough. I mean, we've seen it come and go, though. It's as far as goalies that just have that pretty good season. They make maybe a playoff run. They look really good in the finals. They get you a championship. Seasons after that, it's maybe glimpses of that glory still, but never really quite still get there. So, very very interesting going forward for them as far
So
as
yeah,
that team
um,
staying together. I think if you feel that's still a question mark for them, I'm not too sure.
so the reason I talk about their goaltending situation is Kemper's a free agent.
Is he okay? It's going him.
Yeah, and I don't know if Colorado's going to pay him what the market will pay him, right? Because Kemper's good, but he does have the injury question mark around him. He gets injured a lot. B, he is going to be 33 next year, right? So if a team's willing to sign him for 4 or 5 years, are you willing to match that if you're Colorado? Probably not. Right, I don't think you're willing to have 39-year-old Darcy Kemper on your roster. Take it
Sure.
from a guy who's had to watch a team this year with a very old goalie on his roster. You don't want it. Um, so that's why I question mark their goaltending situation, and what they're going to do about it. However, this is Colorado we're talking about, right? This another very well-run organization. The thing about the NHL over almost any other league, uh, there are teams that are run really well and teams that are run like dog shit. And the teams that are run really well are not that large. So when you see a team like Colorado be in a situation like this, a team like Tampa Bay be in a situation where they don't have much cap room, you don't worry about them because they are franchises that are run abnormally well, right? Whereas you see a guy like Darcy Kemper on the free agency list, and you know that Buffalo is looking to shell out $9 million for the next 5 years to put Darcy Kemper between the pipes and have him get hurt.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and that's really the difference here, right? So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
why I question mark the goaltending situation a little bit for Colorado. Not so much because I don't like Darcy. I think Darcy's a great goaltender. But I wonder, is Buffalo gonna $9 million for the next 5 years on Darcy Kemper
Right.
based off of a playoff run that was good and ignore the fact that he has never played more than 60 games in a single season in his career?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and exactly. I think it's a great point. I think it's something that it happens all the time. You take a look at certain roster moves. I know different sport, but I know early on the Niners didn't sign a couple fan favorite players and people are like, oh my, cornerbacks or wide receivers that are more or less these are your fourth string, third string guys or what have you. Um, People enjoy them, like them, but it's I mean they're going out, they're getting paid, and can't fault them for that. And
Nope.
then on the other side, you got to make the wise business decision on that point. So as much as you might hope there's maybe a hometown discount or something like that, or you're looking for some the funny aspect of there being like player loyalty when a team sure as hell won't show you the loyalty on the other side for pretty much 99.9% of the league, right? There are maybe a few players that will actually carry that kind of they'll be granted that kind of loyalty from the team on the other side of it, but for the most part, you're an asset, you're a
Yep.
resource, and yeah, if someone's gonna overpay for that resource and you're not willing to match that, yeah, gonna have to move on. So good point to that.
Yeah, and that's just it, right? Like I honestly believe Darcy Kemper is somebody who somebody is going to overpay, and that's why I wonder what they're going to do in that. Now, Colorado's the kind of team who will then find that person who nobody's willing to pay and underpay the shit out of them and get the most out of what they have, right? So is that something they do? Do they maybe look to make a trade with somebody? I know John Gibson's out there and available. Now, John Gibson's a guy who hasn't had a great season in his last couple at Anaheim, but he's playing behind a really bad team in Anaheim. So, you get him behind that Colorado defense, which honestly I feel like I could play behind and win us a few games. Um, does that maybe bring back John Gibson of old, right? These are things that Colorado's going to have to wrestle with a little bit here.
Yep.
Because I do wonder what Kemper's market value is going to be. It's going to be more than 4.5. He's getting paid 4.5 this year. I guarantee you his market value is higher than that. I would be willing to go about as high as 6 million on Darcy Kemper, but only for a couple years, right? If somebody's going to give him that kind of money with term, it's not worth matching at that point. Kemper's a very good goalie, but you know exactly what's going to happen with him. He's going to have his fair share of injuries over the course of the season he's going to deal with. He's going to have that issue when he's in your net. He's going to be very good, but how much can you rely on him to be in your net consistently?
No.
You're going to have to kind of nurse him through a year, right? He's not a guy that Vasilevsky, for example, who you can throw out there for 70 games and he's going to be fine, right? Kemper's not that guy. So these are things that they're going to have to weigh through. That's the only question mark around this Colorado team, by the way. And if they get that figured out, what's stopping them from doing it again? Right? They're already... Everybody's scrambling to catch up to them, and they're not even close, is the scary thing. Like, if you look at just rosters, right? Now, obviously, this is the NHL. You get a 7-game series with a team that gets an injury or two, and anything can happen.
Yeah.
But roster-wise right now, nobody is close to the Colorado Avalanche, and I include the Tampa Bay Lightning in that. You look at that defense core they got with Makar and Byram and Johnson and all the guys they got back there. That defense core is untouchable by most teams because they got a lot of these guys on rookie contracts. A lot of these guys are being underpaid for what they bring. You look at that forward crew through... obviously, there's going to be a big question mark for them, too, around Nazem Kadri. Another guy who I think they can find a way to replicate him, right? Because I do think somebody's going to overpay for Kadri based on the playoffs he had. And again, that's not me saying Kadri doesn't deserve his money. Kadri's an unbelievable player who, if he's gotten his head straight, because he had a problem in the past of taking bad suspensions in the playoffs, throwing stupid hits, charging at guys, getting suspended, getting yourself kicked out of games where your team needs you. Didn't do that this year. Kept a level head through everything. In situations where it's almost more expected that he wouldn't have kept a level head.
Right, yeah.
Right? You think about that whole St. Louis situation where Fans calling him racist names. He's getting cross-checked from behind. Binnington's throwing water bottles at him in his post-game press conferences.
My man found an outlet this last off season. Like, I'm gonna
He-
start meditating. I'm gonna do a little boxing, maybe a little like hot yoga. He's got probably like a hot yoga class, some shit he does every Saturday. Fucking, hey.
he got some Zen shit going. So yeah, Kadri's a great piece to any team, but again, how much are you willing to pay for that piece, right? That's the kind of guy who you're willing to pay $4.5 million for. Absolutely, that guy helps you win games. Are you willing to pay $8 million for him? No, I don't think you should be. But I bet you there are some GMs out there who are, because Kadri ticks all the old guy who doesn't know current hockey boxes. Well, he's physical. He can score, and in the playoffs when it gets gritty, man, he's gonna get gritty. Pay him all my money, right? It's another one of those interesting things where Colorado does have a few free agency questions, but for the most part, it's on their complementary pieces, right? McKinnon's not going anywhere. Makar's not going anywhere. Landeskog's not going anywhere. Byram's not going anywhere. So once they figure out what's going on in net, they'll be able to put together pieces around what they got just fine. Tampa Bay is going to have to do what Tampa Bay does every year, right? They're over the salary cap already before the off season even starts. They are over the salary cap, so they're going to have to find ways to get around that. Now they immediately did by trading Ryan McDonough, but how are you going to add? How are you going to catch up to Colorado's roster? It's some interesting questions. There's a few teams out there with some really interesting. Toronto's another one who needs to figure out what the hell's going on in net, and how can we fucking win a Game 7? Because honestly, it's getting ridiculous. If this year was a standalone thing where Tampa beats you in 7, you're not upset about that, right? They're two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. You played them as hard as you possibly could. Got a little bit unfortunate there in Game 7. Happens, right. But this is like 5 years now of losing the first round deciding game, and you lose it. They got to figure out what the hell they got to do to get over that hump, right? You got a team like Edmonton, who this playoff run was the worst possible thing for them, because their GM's an incompetent twit. But you made the second round of the playoffs. You made the Western Conference Finals. You're not going to fire him.
Yeah, it's granted different sport, but we've been seeing that a little bit lately. Teams that make decent playoff runs, there has been. I'm trying to think of the coach. Actually, no. What I'm talking about, it did happen in the NHL. I'm trying to remember who the fuck got fired. Like at the very, very.
Dallas, Rick Bowness?
It was like right after they got knocked out, basically.
Dallas fired Rick Bowness within like days of being eliminated.
And it was just like, damn. So I guess there is a little bit of that. But yeah, it's usually the thing to point to, hey, we had recent success, in a typical kind of not looking at the long term perhaps, and, what have you done for me lately? If what you've done for me lately is get you to the second round of the playoffs, that probably buys you a little bit more time, right?
Yeah, but the thing about the Edmonton thing that bothers me is they made it there because, A, they were in the weakest division in the NHL, right? Like, their first round playoff matchup was San Jose. A team who, let's face it, in any other division wouldn't have been close. But they're in the Pacific, so, they got past Vegas, who was a clusterfuck, and Anaheim, and all those teams that stink.
Yeah.
Right? So, you got this young team that's on the up, or it was LA, not San Jose. My bad. It was the Kings. Yeah.
We didn't make the playoffs, but we're easy wins throughout that fucking regular season. That's for sure.
Here's the thing: the California teams were all in the exact same spot this year, so they were all interchangeable in my head.
Right.
Very young teams who are nowhere near good enough to be a playoff team yet. However, one of them was because of the situation, and you nearly lost to them. But you got through it. Calgary choked so hard. and you make it to the Western Conference Finals where you proceed to get your ass kicked by Colorado. And everybody goes, well, of course they got their ass kicked by Colorado. It's like, yeah, but your job as the GM should be to build a team that it shouldn't be, of course, you got your ass kicked by Colorado. Do you trust this guy to do it? No. Like, this is the guy who single-handedly put Detroit into a 10-year rebuild that they're still not out of. Right? Why is Ken Holland getting more rope? I don't know, but... So that's the thing in Edmonton, right? You look through the playoff teams, Calgary needs to figure out what's going on with Johnny Gaudreau. Right? That's a huge one. It doesn't sound like he's coming back to Calgary, so... Florida needs to figure out how to win in the playoffs. You know, Toronto gets a lot of flack because they've done it for longer, but honestly, Florida's getting into bad territory as well. They won their first round series again. Congratulations. You proceeded to get your asses handed to you by Tampa Bay in 4 games. Just absolutely slapped out of the playoffs. Yeah. So, you know, you look at Colorado and the situation they're in as compared to the teams that were around them in the playoffs. Who's stopping them? Yeah. Right? It's a scary situation if you look at if you're one of the other teams in the NHL, because how do you stop this Colorado team right now? Yeah, it was an awesome series. A fun playoff as a whole, to be honest with you, right? We got a Battle of Alberta and a Battle of Florida, even if both of them didn't quite go as long as you would have liked. The Battle of Alberta in particular, I thought had a lot of really fun moments in it. I might be a little bit biased because, again, we beat Calgary's, but I thought the series as a whole was actually pretty fun. You had everything you expected to have in there. You had fights, you had big hits, momentum swings, crazy amounts of goals. It was a fun series. So I think the playoffs as a whole were a big success for the NHL because they were just a fun playoffs. And you got the 2 best teams in the finals, and it made the finals really interesting. So good playoffs for the NHL. Congratulations to Colorado. Yeah. Off-season's going to be interesting, though. Yeah. I think there's a few teams that are in really interesting spots this off-season.
We shall see. Yeah, once you know, free agency opens up, see some movement. Yeah, and yeah, probably, definitely some goaltender movement. It seems like that's going to be the case. So, looking forward to it. Let's see. Probably don't actually have too much time, so let's kind of quick hit on a few things. Suppose we are starting to get into the real meat of the season, starting to look a little bit clearer as far as baseball is concerned right now. Just for a personal note, what I've been paying attention to, it has been really hard to watch the Giants lately. Actually watching with my folks yesterday for a little pre-4th of July, a little barbecue. You know, good competitive game at points, but they have had a little bit of injury bug, especially on their middle infield, and they cannot save themselves. Just putting themselves in some really bad situations. Pitching's really kind of up short on them too as well. Getting absolutely dog walked by the White Sox in the game yesterday and in the series. I think they're on they've lost their last 8 out of 10. So been a little tough. They are going to, I believe they're playing like 7 straight games on the road here coming up starting today. So they got to turn around right now pretty much as we're starting to get into the All-Star break. That's going to be not too long from now already, kind of to that point. So for a personal note, yeah, it's been interesting baseball wise. Yeah, as far as the Giants are concerned, have you been catching up any at all on the baseball?
Oh yeah. Obviously, as a Blue Jays fan, we have a big case of we don't fucking have a bullpenitis right now. It's been absolutely killing them. They're such a weird team. Yeah. The Blue Jays right now are such a fucking anomaly of we have this great offense and pretty decent starting pitching and no bullpen, and the back half of our starting pitching hasn't been very great either. Yeah. And it's guys who you weren't expecting to not be very great. Jose Barrios, his last start was outstanding. The few before that were horrendous. Right? And this is a guy who 7 years in the bigs has consistently had the exact same ERA almost, across the 7 years, his ERAs fluctuate between 3.4 and 3.7. Right? Like, this is the guy who, that's his ERA. He is a very good starting pitcher every year. And he's just been struggling bad. You say Kikuchi's been awful, but, I mean, he was awful in the back half of last year with Seattle, too. They got a 7-game road trip here coming up as well. They got 3 in Oakland starting tonight, and then 4 in Seattle after that. That should be a couple of winnable series for them. And, you win them. Let's say you go 5-2 on a 7-game Western road swing. It feels better again.
Right.
They're still 14 and a half or 14 games back of the Yankees because the Yankees are just on a ridiculous pace right now. But realistically, the AL East is sending 3 teams to the playoffs. So you just got to stay ahead of the Red Sox and the Rays, right? So, bit of a rough stretch. I'm not terribly worried about it, but they do need to make some moves. They need to shore up their starting rotation a little bit, and they need to find some bullpen help pretty badly. That always comes towards post-All-Star break, post-draft, towards the trade deadline is when real relief arms become available. So we'll see what they do at that point. But I think this Oakland series in particular is going to be interesting for them because I think there's a few guys that they'll probably be knocking on Oakland's door for. Oakland, a bad team, but with some interesting pitchers right now that I feel like the Jays might feel like could help them. So
yeah.
We'll see.
Oakland is a good team to get good against, basically, right now in this season. They are struggling would be a favorable term, I think, for them. They are getting absolutely demolished this season.
They are somehow making the Cincinnati Reds look competent, and that's impressive in and of itself.
Yeah, based on that really early season, that Reds team was looking absolutely dreadful. But making them look a little bit better. See, anything else you wanted to touch upon as far as the MLB is concerned? I will, in a semi-baseball related statement, been loving the MLW season so far. Last game was pretty phenomenal. Gators D-backs. That D-backs team all of a sudden, it's not looking good. All of a sudden, you're talking about your championship team there. They're gonna have to find a way to make it happen to get into the playoffs right now. But awesome with the MLW stuff too. Been trying to keep up with that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, the D-backs need to find somebody outside of Norp who can fucking hit the ball.
Yeah.
Norp's batting something like 450 through numbers I saw. Everybody else is like in the 100s.
Yeah.
Like, somebody needs to hit that ball.
And folks are laying off the pitches too on Norp. He's giving up walks every now and then, and they're able to. It's usually a walk or two, and then someone they're reading that crazy curve, and they're getting some good wood on the ball basically. It's been interesting to see the struggles of the D-backs there, but Gators pulled out a hell of a series in the last one. Looking forward to the good old Brandon Allen and the Eagles next time.
Yeah.
I think they should be like the next game up.
Yeah. I did figure PFF posted something interesting yesterday that I wanted to bring up with you while we're here. So Pro Football Focus posted a picture asking who wins a ring first. So I want to see how you respond to this because I do think we might differ on this one. So Tap, who wins a Super Bowl first? Is it Josh Allen? Lamar Jackson? Is it our boy Joey Burrow? Or is it Justin Herbert?
I gotta go with Josh Allen on that one.
I think the Bills are the closest team there.
I think so. I mean, we love Burrow, obviously. I don't want to say necessarily this Bengals is a flash in the pan. They are building more toward it, so I think they're looking to make a run, which is something you don't see out of the Bengals.
Yeah.
So I am pretty hopeful for them. Based off last year, and they've just kind of lost some weapons. Their defense is actually really nice for the Ravens, but their defense is usually really nice for the Ravens. So I don't know about Lamar and how that offense is going to run. If they're going to be just kind of stuck in that, just more of a, keep it on the ground mentality and probably overrunning Lamar too much, not as explosive on the offensive side as they need to be. And Herbert, I mean, honestly, I think that was a team that should have been there last year, by all means. And the way they fumbled it, I'm not sure. I mean, I really like Keenan Allen. He's still there, right? We didn't have another crazy trade. All right.
Nope, Keenan Allen's still there.
I gotta make sure.
As of now, Keenan Allen is still a Charger.
Yeah, so I like the Chargers as well. They would be my two as far as Herbert. But yeah, right now, Allen, the way Buffalo just seems closer to that element of being able to have a full championship team, basically.
So, if you had asked me this before the offseason, my answer would have definitely been Josh Allen.
Right.
As of right now, if you ask me who I think is the most likely to win a ring first, I gotta go Joe Burrow. And not just because the Bengals made the Super Bowl this year. We talked about it. They had a lot of things bounce their way to get there, right? And a lot of things went well. They didn't rest on their laurels. They went into this offseason. Yeah. That offensive line went from looking like a real weakness to something that could be a real strength for them this year. Right? If you can get Burrow some time with the weapons that team's got, right? If you can keep him off of his back as often as he was last year, man, I love that Bengals team right now.
Right. I would agree with you for the most part with that. The one question I have is that they had obviously the offensive line, addressing that, and I think that's key. You're gonna only help obviously Burrow out and giving them time. You're gonna help mixing out by giving them perhaps some better defenses to look against. They're not going to be able to necessarily maybe stack the box or something like that as much. Obviously, you already had that kind of with those receivers. I wonder if they're going to be so effective as they were on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the trenches. That defensive line was great last season. And it's going to be hard to really replicate that. Because they're not going to sneak up on – you're not going to sneak up on anybody now, right? You just were in the Super Bowl. So the Bengals game 1 through 8, or week 1 through 18, you're not going to hide, right? Not that they would necessarily, but it's just teams are going to be pretty ready to play them. So I wonder if they're going to have the same kind of run. I couldn't imagine that it's quite the same way, but Bengals are doing all the right things this offseason for sure. I couldn't disagree with that. They have done a great job addressing their biggest need, which was the offensive line.
Really like the addition of La'el Collins, obviously. I love the addition of Hayden Hurst for them, adding in a good blocking tight end to that scheme as well. I think it's going to help them a lot. Alex Kappa, Ted Karras. I don't know. I really like what they did with that offensive line. I don't disagree necessarily with the defense per se. But I think with all the weapons they have on offense, they might have the best the best 3-man wide receiving core.
It's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against it. Yeah.
With Boyd, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, obviously, right? That. I can't off the top of my head think of a team that's got a better wide receiver 3 than that.
If I'm not to be a homer, but the Niners might be right there with Ayuk, Debo, Jennings.
I do
close.
Like Juwan Jennings, but
it's close. I give it
Boyd level.
And then, but you add in that tight end factor. All of a sudden, you got a Kittle, and the Bengals just lost their OG. We love. I'm flaking on his name. Thank you.
Big CJ.
Love CJ, but yeah. Yeah. So
Um,
unfortunately, they do lose a really nice weapon on that. I know you love your boy Hayden Hurst, Falcons transplant, right?
yes.
Yes.
But Hayden Hurst is there to be more of a blocking tight
Right.
end
No,
than
of course he's only
a
coming in
receiving
on
tight
certain.
end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like this is a guy who's going to be there to help protect Burrow and help get that running game continuing to move.
Yeah.
This is a team that's got a good running game too,
God, yes.
right?
Yeah. Love Joe
This is
Mix.
not a team to sleep on with Joe Mixon in the backfield. If you get too committed to that pass game, Joe Mixon's gonna burn you.
Who's their spell too? Who's their second running back? I remember liking them as
Um,
well. I could
yeah,
flip this myself.
I I can't think of it off the top of my head either, but I do remember. I'm with you. Samaje P. Ryan.
Oh, P Ryan. Yeah, yeah, I like P Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah. So, they have a really good backfield, and if you're just so selling out to that passing game, Mixon's gonna burn you.
Right.
And I don't know. I really like the way their roster is built. The Bills would be my second, and I absolutely can't argue Josh Allen. I would have the Chargers third, and the Ravens a quite distant fourth on this. I don't like a lot of what they've done this offseason at all, really. And as much as I like Lamar Jackson as a quarterback, I feel like they're trying to do too much with him at times, right? They want him to do everything. Whereas, run some RPO, get him moving, get him just focused on being a good moving quarterback, right? I feel like too often they want him to, okay, we're going to run a couple RPOs. Now you're going to sit in the pocket for a little bit and really dart the ball down the field. And it's like, why? You're wasting a guy with an exceptional talent. Use that exceptional talent. On top of that, trading Hollywood Brown is not going to help that offense in any way.
No. That's for damn sure. That was,
So,
we've already gone through like the
yeah.
craziness that was, but just the idea of like, God, that's like the only guy I could really point to on as far as a receiving option outside of your tight end, and so you still got
Yeah.
that going, but like you're already leaning way too much into that play. You need something on the outside there. You could draft and what have you, and but it's definitely a fall off. You're not getting any better in that aspect of your team for sure.
As of right now, going into the season, Baltimore's top three wide receivers would be Rashad Bateman, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet II.
No.
I like Rashad Bateman. I think Devin Duvernay's fine, but none of them stand out as a true, this is going to be your guy who can get you 1,000 yards this year. Right? That's the thing, right? Is you traded away a guy who look at and go, that's a guy who can get you 1,000 yards this year. And now you don't have that. That defense is good, but I mean, this is a team that was already struggling winning some games 17-15, right? They were scoring less than 20 a game in certain games, and now in that new and completely revamped AFC where every team feels like they have 2 or 3 wide receivers that can burn you, you can't be a team that's scoring 17 points in a game, right? You can't win like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was just an interesting little topic to bring up there because it came across my feed the other day and I was like,
oh
sure.
no, I mean, you know what? It was great. Like I did start getting into it with hoops and stuff like that. It was enjoyable to watch the Warriors. Definitely was checking out the NHL. Baseball, we'll pop it on time to time, and then we had a fun UFC and stuff like that. Other sports will be around, but we both know. It's all about football right now. I'm itching. I'm itching, and the off season has been actually phenomenal. So a lot of interest there.
Yeah.
Really seeing how some of these teams are gonna look from last year to this year is gonna be very interesting. And talking about this next upcoming season, we'll announce it here. We will be doing. Obviously, we'll be probably going back to our weekly format for the NFL. I figured that's going to be the case. Along with that, though, we will be doing the Heavy Weapons Crew. That's our kind of gaming affiliate group that me and Craig are both a part of. We will be joining quite a few other folks in that community, and we'll be doing our first ever fantasy football league for the HWC. Really looking forward to that. We're gonna have some veterans of some fantasy football, some folks that know some football but probably haven't played some fantasy football before. We got some folks that are potentially pretty new to football and new to fantasy football as well, but they're gamers as well, so might be able to take us all down. That should be a lot of fun. We will be doing probably a draft special for our league. We'll be doing a stream of that, of course. Along with that, we'll probably also be doing updates on games of the week. That'll probably start to get incorporated into the weekly show. But that's down the pipeline. That's when we're getting into the football season. Looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I don't know. Last year in fantasy, because I was in a group of people that I didn't really know all that well, right? Like, it wasn't as fun for me. So I'm looking forward to, getting back to playing some friends in fantasy football every week. I'm looking forward to... me and you have never been in a fantasy football league before together. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a good time.
I have a history of having an excellent team, doing very well in the regular season, maybe running in some rough matchups here and there, but making the playoffs and then utterly falling apart in the playoffs. So we're going to try to break that, but we'll see. It should be a lot of fun. We'll have some rivalries. We'll probably be talking some shit on it as well. So it will be a good old fun with fantasy football. So looking forward to that. Down the pipeline, we'll have to set... I know, drafts and stuff, that's not happening right now. Probably, I would imagine, it's the format I'm most familiar with, or the website I'm most familiar with. I usually do it through Yahoo Sports, but we'll weigh our options, see what works best for everybody, and get an update to you on that. So, down the line.
Down the line stuff, but I think that's all I got.
All right. I think that works out for me as well. We got our D&D session coming up in a little bit here. So that's going to wrap it up for us. This is episode 22 of Sports Clichés. I'm Jay. That's Craig. We'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your 4th of July. If you're watching live here on twitch.tv/tapatioj, that is TAPATIOJ. Or you go ahead and check us out on YouTube. We'll have this episode uploaded to the Sports Clichés podcast channel on YouTube. You can look us up there. You'll be able to find us through that. So we will all see you later. Have a great one. And, good night.
Deuces, everybody.